receipt monetization issues. Actually, the purpose of keeping this video is pretty simple. As you understand that our PPP desk is pretty much operational and we are approximately closing to $500 billion of AUM, and I'm also very pleased to share that our fixed income platform, which is www.fixedincome.global, is now a reality. So it's a first fixed income platform of the globe, and of course this is not the only thing which we have. It's going to be like iPhone. It's pretty simple. It's going to be like iPhone. You know that every year we would be launching a different version of that platform. So whatever you have now, although it is pretty extensive, but a fresh version would be coming in September 2018, then 2019, and so on and so forth. So just like Apple, who is launching a fresh phone every year, we would be launching our fixed income platform every year. So in this fixed income platform, which is www.fixedincome.global, you are most welcome to visit the desk called PPP, Private Placement Platform, and then you can have any issues, you can write to us. We would surely be replying to you. Today we are going to talking about an issue which is SKR, Safe Keeping Receipt, monetization issued. Actually, there is a reason of shooting that video. The reason of shooting that video is, we're getting a lot of requests from the people, those who wanted to have an SKR, basically wanted to have SKR. And what we're doing that, we are not the issuing authority. So we go to banks, and we are not talking about Indian banks, right? We go to international G7 banks like Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan, Standard Chartered, and other. You know that I was a treasury head of an American company. So we go to these banks and ask for the SKR. The biggest problem is that client don't understand that. Client thinks that, if I have a land or I have an asset or I have anything, then, then suppose he thinks that the government has given a value of 500 crores, assuming the bank would be giving that value. So there are a lot of monetization issues that is linked with the SKR. Of course, when it comes to the monetized PPP, and also the biggest problem which we are facing nowadays is that a lot of people tend to believe that monetized PPP is as same as SKR. No. The difference between monetized PPP and SKR, like we have difference between US and Singapore. US is an independent country, Singapore is an independent country. Both, of course, are the world financial centers, like US and Singapore both, and equally head to head, right? But that doesn't mean that both are same countries. Both are different and independent countries. So monetized PPP program is completely different than SKR. But the hard reality is that 99% of the calls which we are receiving, people tend to believe that no, both are same. And I fail to understand how both are same. But anyways, today we are going to discuss about the topic which is SKR, and in this we are going to be talking about the monetization issues in two ways. So the first monetization issues would be from the perspective of the bank, and second monetization issues which we are facing from the perspective of the corporate. I have deliberately used the term corporate. I could have also used the term investor. So it is more or less the same thing. Now when I go, now let's take an example. Very simple. This is treasury consulting. Treasury consulting would be going to bank, and this is our client. Treasury consulting, the client is holding any asset. First of all, we need to understand that very clearly. We need to understand one thing, that not all the assets are subject to SKR. Unfortunately, there are people, those who have malls, shopping malls, they have arts, they have above ground assets, they have underground assets, they have coal, they have platinum, they have bullion. They believe that it could be SKR. And yesterday I was very much shocked, not surprised, shocked, when somebody wrote me on the Skype and said that he has issued a loan of approximately $1.5 billion from some bank. I don't want to name the person and also the bank. It is actually a dollar LIBOR loan. He said, I wanted to have an SKR of that, and I wanted to get it trade. I wanted to answer him that something which do not belong to you, you issued a debt of $1.5 billion, and somebody gave you money, so it's a liability on you. that certificate you wanted to get it traded in the PPP market via an SKR. Now, the biggest issue which we have in SKR is not involving the tripatriate lot of places that I would let you know. When the asset class is easy, example shares, example bonds, example certificate, example commercial paper, example certificate of deposit, and there are so many things, then valuation is not an issue. Of course, that doesn't mean that valuation is never be an issue. I don't want you to name any country, but we have a lot of countries in Europe, those who are facing a lot of credit rating issues, and again they are in the news due to a lot of credit rating issues, and European Central Bank again and again go into the market and they have to rescue them, and that is a hardcore reality of the life. If any of these countries would be issuing certificate of deposit, commercial paper, bank acceptance, treasury bill, treasury strips, or bonds, or notes, or anything, then SKR would surely be an issue. Comparatively with the countries like Singapore, Finland, I would say United States of America, Australia, Tokyo, and all, because these more or less are triple rated economies. People trust on them. This is one thing. Another thing is when you have a physical asset, example on the ground and below the ground. In SKR, which is safekeeping receipt, there is a tendency that when you have a ground asset, either it is on the ground or it is off the ground or it is on the ground. So with something which is on the ground, something which is under the ground, like diamond. Diamond is pretty much under the ground, like coal, which is pretty much under the ground, platinum, iron ore. People believe that it is very easy to have an SKR of that. It is pretty easy to have to get it monetized. This is an absolute wrong theory. So if I have a client who is coming to me and he is holding two type of portfolio, one is shares, bonds, debentures, you just name it, and another is assets. Now, for both, when I go to the bank, assuming I am going to Goldman Sachs, I am just taking an example. I am going to Goldman Sachs to issue an SKR. I am going to the New York division of Goldman Sachs to issue SKR. Goldman Sachs would be doing the haircut. That haircut of the Goldman Sachs would completely be different than the haircut of all the banks. Example, you cannot criticize Goldman Sachs saying that the Credit Suisse, JP Morgan, Standard Chartered, UBS, Deutsche, Barclays, and maybe XYZ. They are, they are doing the haircut of 5%. And you are doing the haircut of 3%. Sorry, they are doing haircut of 5%, you are doing haircut of 10%. You cannot criticize that. It is bank to bank policy. The reason being, think like an accountant. Here a bank is playing a two role actually, which we really don't want you to understand. Here the bank like Goldman Sachs is playing the role of a tripatriate repo also. Now what do you mean by tripatriate repo? Actually he is the person who is holding the particular asset in the book. And when you will come to him, he will return that to you. And in return, he will issue you a certificate which you can very well trade it. Actually, you are not trading that certificate. There is a misconception that I have an asset. Actually, the client do have an asset. Treasury Consulting LLP is going to Goldman Sachs and Goldman Sachs would be issue SKR. And for that, they are going to issue something which is pretty much tangible, which is known as certificate. People tend to believe that they are actually trading that certificate, which is a very wrong tendency which people do have. No, that is absolutely incorrect. Boss, you are not trading that certificate. You are trading the name of Goldman Sachs, which is on the certificate. I don't want you to name the bank, but I hope you have a guess that we have a bank in this PPP trade who can do anything. So I don't want to name this publicly. I hope you make sense which bank I am talking about. This bank can do anything for trade. Even if you ask them that 1 plus 1 equal to 200, they will do 1 plus 1 equal to 200. And if another client will say 1 plus 1 equal to 700, they will do 1 plus 1 equal to 700. Simple. It is that kind of caliber of bank. If this bank, without quoting the name, would be issuing SKR, on the contrary, the bank like Goldman Sachs would be issuing the SKR, the value would completely be different. So don't be under a dilemma that you are trading a certificate or you are trading an asset class. You are actually trading the name on the certificate. So if 5 traders, like say you just put any 5 name at place of Treasury Consulting LLP. If 5 traders are in the business of SKR and all 5 reaching to 5 different banks, example Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan, Standard Chartered, and UBS, assuming the value of that trade would completely be different, because actually that asset class is not getting traded. It is the name on that asset class which is trading. I doesn't mean to say that the value of that asset class is extremely zero. No, that is absolutely wrong. But the name is quite matters. One important thing which we need to understand very clearly, that when the period of the SKR goes long, then there is a direct proportion of monetization with the period. So let's take an example. I have a certificate of deposit, and we all understand that globally the certificate of deposit is a short-term money market instrument which all being issued by a bank. Or let's take simple, I have a commercial paper which is being issued by a company. It's again a short-term money market instrument from 0 to 275 days. Now that commercial paper I wanted to get it trade. Now that commercial paper, once you wanted to get it trade, don't think that you issued a commercial paper. Because if you issued a commercial paper and you wanted to get it trade, then it would be a completely different process. I'm saying you have invested in that commercial paper and you wanted to get it trade. So you are an investor, you're not a company. So there is a different company who issued a certificate, a commercial paper, you invested in that actually. Now when you invested in that commercial paper, you wanted to get it trade, right? In that, one thing is you will go to the secondary market and you will sell it. How much money you make? I doubt even 1%. And considering the US Treasury bills, not more than I think 0.23% to 0.25% is something which is pretty much high, to be precise and to be frank. You will go to a bank and the bank will issue an SKR. Bank will issue SKR, safekeeping receipt. Trust me, you go to 5 banks: Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan, Standard Chartered, and UBS, and take a SKR certificate. And of course MT 542 applicable, which is message transfer 542 will applicable. Once you will take this certificate, once you have this certificate stamped by these 5 banks, you go to the PPP market, and I'll let you know that all 5 would be traded in a different way. That is something which is very confidential and that we don't want to discuss here. For more, you just visit www.fixedincome.global. There is something you will get to know PPP desk, and here you can ask questions. But anyways, let's move forward. Sometimes banks go hierarchical monetization. Hierarchical monetization, again, I don't want to discuss in detail because this is very much confidential and very technical. Hierarchical monetization is something US banks are pretty much known for that. You know what they're saying, that if the holding period of the SKR is more than 1 year, example, I have a land of iron ore. I think that this iron ore will come out. I think that we have sufficient iron ore to come out in the last 10 years. So today is 2018 and I have valuation report which confirms that by 2018 the iron ore will continue to come. I'll go to bank and bank is agree with the monetization value and bank is ready to give me SKR. Now the SKR bank is giving is actually for 10 years. It is not giving a straight SKR. Now the SKR which bank is giving, they will go for hierarchical monetization. Like for first year, they will take 5%. I'm just taking a hypothetical. I'm not supposed to tell you the actual values here. So the first is 5%, second year could be 7.5%, third year could be 8%, fourth year could be 9%, and so on and so forth. The biggest difference between SKR issued by Indian banks and the US banks, and especially one of the wonderful banks in the world, which is Goldman Sachs, is hierarchical monetization. None of the Indian banks is having any capability. You understand, now they are full of NPAs and so many stories which are around. But for a minute, if you ignore that, none of the Indian banks even closer to edge of hierarchical monetization, which could only be possible provided you will reach to US banks, top US banks and top European banks, number one stuff. This is one thing. Now when you have this certificate issued, assuming the Goldman Sachs, take a simple example, issued a certificate and assuming the value is 500 billion. Let's take a simple example. This is the value of an asset. You have 3 reports and so on and so forth. You will go to the trading unit, and of course there is a role of MT 542. This is strictly confidential, that how MT 542 works. This is something I don't want to tell here right away. So you will go to a trading unit and you will give this certificate to a trader, and you just wanted to get it trade. The biggest difference, I don't know who spreaded this information in the market. At least I not did so. But the biggest wrong thing or the biggest fake thing, I would say, I have never used the word fake, but I'm forced to. The biggest fake thing which we have in the market is people are saying there are people, those who are generating 25% per week on SKR. I strongly doubt if they are generating that. Even if, let me quote a name of the bank, which is ING, which is not a pretty strong bank in Europe now. And let me go to a bank which is GS, Goldman Sachs, which is in the US. If I have two banks, which is Goldman Sachs, on the contrary, I have a bank which is ING. Of course, one major benefit which PPP would always have is the subordinate rating. GS would always have better rating than ING. Now, since there is an issue of subordinated rating would come, the PPP would gain the money. That is quite sure. But if somebody is coming to you and saying that he will give you 25% on weekly basis on SKR, then I need to check that how this could be possible. Practically how this could be possible. Another biggest problem which people actually don't understand, and because of this a lot of people are losing a lot of money in SKR trade actually, is that once you give a certificate to the PPP, I think very rarely traders will tell you that, boss, you have given me a certificate of $500 billion, but the actual value of the trade would be $400 billion. It's not going to be $500 billion. The reason being, that there is a haircut which we also going to be taking, because of course the impact of the implied vol has to take into consideration. Now that haircut which a trading unit is taking, that haircut varies from one trading unit to another trading unit. They might go for hierarchical haircuts, they might not go for hierarchical haircuts. At the end, you have an asset of say $600 billion, which being certified at $500 billion by GS. If you go to another bank, it would be lesser than that, maybe more than that. Once you go to the PPP for trading, it would be not $500 billion, it would surely be less than $500 billion. It could be 450, it could be 400, it could be less than that, subject to PPP. Last but not the least, then we wind up this video. If any PPP while trading a SKR is not telling you that I am implying a monetized SKR, it effectively means that your capital is at loss. Because ultimately, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks or 5 weeks down the line, but you will get to know that, boss, I'm having a certificate of 350 billion or $500 billion, but at the end my total capital is standing roughly $350 billion. So as an investor, it's your prime duty to ask from the PPP player that, excuse me boss, how much haircut you are implying. Of course, there are a lot of issues which we can talk about. The SKR. SKR is something which is pretty interesting, and unfortunately there are a lot of people who tend to believe that SKR is a pretty easy topic, but that is not. SKR is a quite complicated topic, and there are a lot of paperwork which is required. The hierarchical monetization is required. Different banks have different considerations. People like us, when our clients want SKR, we will go to more than 7 banks for SKR. We will see the different valuations we are giving. We'll see the different monetization issues which is coming. SKR is, theoretically speaking, if you open Google and type SKR, you will get to know that it's quite easy. On the other hand, if you practically do SKR, you will get to know things are quite difficult. And if the banks are not letting you know about that, it effectively means that one day you would surely be facing it, but that too in the form of the capital loss. This is what we wanted to discuss. Of course, in case you have any questions, visit our fixed income platform www.fixedincome.global. Our another website www.treasuryconsulting.in is still open and it continue to run. Of course, next year we would be changing that, to be honest. My mobile is 9899242978. On the contrary, email ID is rahul.magan@treasuryconsulting.in. My Skype ID known to most of the people, which is Rahul5327. Thank you and have a great time. Enjoy your day.